Many organizations possess perfectly drafted, board-approved data privacy policies, yet that paperwork often masks a chaotic reality of unprotected information. Real personal data rarely stays neatly confined to official IT registers. It proliferates across shadow IT folders, unmanaged SaaS platforms, and shared email inboxes. Traditional audit methods miss this discrepancy entirely. By relying on management declarations and reviewing legal templates, they test the organization's intentions rather than verifying actual system outputs. There is a strict divide between control design, what the organization claims to do on paper, and operating effectiveness, which is what the system logs prove actually happens on the ground. If an auditor cannot verify a control's operation with hard system evidence, from a legal and regulatory standpoint, that control does not exist. This is the core of the GDPR accountability principle. The law places the burden of proof squarely on the organization. Compliance cannot be passively declared through broad policy statements. It must be proactively demonstrated through traceable, irrefutable evidence. A rigorous GDPR audit translates these theoretical, principle-based legal requirements into a strict, testable framework of technical controls. To build a defensible audit, we have to discard management assumptions entirely and begin our assessment from a baseline of raw, primary data. We can map this process using an audit dependency matrix. Compliance operates as a rigid sequence. If an organization fails at the foundation, that error corrupts the entire downstream structure. That foundation starts with the true scope of personal data. It extends far beyond the obvious names and email addresses listed in official IT databases. Auditors actively hunt for indirect identifiers, like IP addresses, behavioral analytics logs, and internal employee numbers, because they can single out a specific individual. Once the data is identified, we move to role processification. You can never accept a third-party vendor's contractual label at face value. Look at this digital contract. The vendor might label themselves a processor, but if they divert that data to train proprietary AI, making independent decisions, that discretion legally transforms them into an independent controller, invalidating your Article 28 agreements. Incorrect role mapping breaks the legal framework of all subsequent data processing relationships, creating massive, invisible regulatory exposure. With roles established, we apply the lawful basis litmus test. Every distinct processing purpose within an organization requires its own specific documented lawful justification. A single human resources platform perfectly illustrates this complexity. Processing data for monthly payroll relies on an employment contract, but using that exact same data for automated performance tracking requires an entirely different legal justification. When testing these justifications, consent is often the weakest link. In situations of inherent power imbalance, such as the employer-employee relationship, an individual cannot freely refuse, rendering any collected consent legally invalid. Even when appropriate, consent evidence must be robust. A database cell showing true is useless. Strong evidence requires a structured log, timestamp, notice version, specific purpose, and IP source. Auditors must also verify a functional withdrawal route for that exact record. If an organization relies on legitimate interests, the rules are equally strict. A formal balancing assessment must be completed and timestamped before processing begins. Retroactively applying a lawful basis to an ongoing process destroys evidential integrity. From an audit perspective, that constitutes an automatic compliance failure. Next, we test operational adherence to the Article 5 principles. This requires tracking how data actually behaves over time within a live lifecycle. A primary failure is purpose creep. This occurs when data legally collected for an authorized task is silently diverted to secondary uses. Auditors cross-reference the official record of processing activities against live data warehouse feeds, looking for unapproved data stipends. We apply the same rigor to storage limitation. A written data retention policy sitting on an internet page is not a control. The actual technical control is the automated deletion script executing on the server, or the time-stamped manual destruction log. To verify deletion, auditors probe beyond the main application. We check legacy environments and inspect IT restoration procedures to ensure that deploying a backup does not reintroduce erased data back into production. True adherence to Article 5 is proven solely by what an organization actively deletes and technically restricts, never by what it claims to protect. Technical compliance needs an overarching governance architecture. Individual controls are one component beneath a larger management framework. This architecture dictates reporting lines. When system-level anomalies occur in HR or procurement, that data must seamlessly escalate to the data protection officer and the board. Without continuous monitoring, technical controls that function perfectly today will inevitably degrade as software updates roll out, vendors change, and new data streams are added. Governance is the mechanism that transforms static compliance checklists into a resilient, living operational capability. This brings us to how auditors calculate materiality and assign risk ratings. In GDPR, we focus strictly on the evidence gap. A minor documentation flaw, like a missing privacy notice for basic business contacts, carries a low risk profile. But uncontrolled system access to special category health data represents a critical operational failure. Materiality here is measured strictly by the potential harm and exposure to individuals. This metric entirely supersedes traditional financial audit thresholds. Ultimately, a defensible GDPR audit program is constructed entirely on primary evidence. That means relying on system screenshots, structured activity logs, system configuration exports, and timestamped approvals. Organizational intentions, empty declarations, and unread paperwork will never survive regulatory scrutiny. In the end, only verifiable operational reality remains.